Welcome to the debut episode of the AniMental podcast. I'm your host, Lainey, and I'm extremely excited to get this discussion underway. Before we start, I want to explain a bit about what this podcast will be about since there's potential to make assumptions based on the title. If you missed our intro episode, AniMental is a podcast dedicated to analyzing and discussing mental health through the medium of anime. The goal of this podcast is to facilitate an open discussion about mental health, provide educational context, recommend potential coping strategies, empathy building, and more through the stories of the characters within this medium. Some little disclaimers. While I am a mental health professional, my goal is to discuss rather than strictly diagnose. Being that these are fictional characters, nuance must be taken into consideration, though there may be individuals who reflect similar traits in real life or use these characters as role models. God help us all. You are free to agree or disagree with opinions that I or any guest that I feature in the future may have. I just ask you to be respectful in the comments no matter where you're hearing or watching this podcast. All right, now the disclaimers are out of the way, it's time to talk about our first character on this podcast, Suguru Geto from Jujutsu Kaisen. Or if you are a dub watcher, Suguru Geto. I don't know why they call that man that, but we're going to talk about Geto, and I'm going to call him Geto because, Suguru is like, well, I love it. It's a tongue twister. In having this discussion about Geto, I will be having an open dialogue using information from the manga, the prequel film, and the anime series. For manga spoilers, this will mainly involve chapters point 1 to point 4 of volume 0 and chapters 65 to 69 from volumes 8 and 9 in the manga. For anime spoilers, this will involve a discussion of the film Jujutsu Kaisen 0 and the first 5 episodes for the second season of Jujutsu Kaisen that covers the hidden inventory and premature death arc. That was your final warning about spoilers because we're about to talk about my man. Alright, who is Suguru Geto? Geto is an antagonist from JJK, but he didn't start out that way. Born in 1990 to non-sorcerer parents, Geto eventually developed his own abilities to manipulate cursed energy and found himself a student at Tokyo Jujutsu High in the mid-2000s. With the ability to manipulate thousands of curses at the same time and gain the ability to control them by consuming them, it wasn't a surprise that he became a formidable force and eventually gained the title of Special Grade Sorcerer. This made Geto one of 4 sorcerers in his special grade rank, one that he shared with his close friend Gojo Satoru. As a student, Geto was tasked with going off on missions to exorcise curses and protect non-sorcerers in Japan. Together with Gojo, the duo became known as the strongest due to the quick work that they would make on their missions. This trajectory Geto found himself on would change tragically during his second year at Tokyo Jujutsu High in 2006. Geto and Gojo were tasked with the mission to escort the star plasma vessel Riko Amanai to Master Tengen to merge her and prevent Tengen from ascending to a new state of being and becoming an enemy to humanity. So what's the deal with Tengen? So Tengen is an immortal Jujutsu sorcerer that remains within the tombs of the Star Corridor at all times to reinforce the barriers that protect both the Jujutsu High locations, the pillars of Jujutsu world, and strengthen the assistant manager's barrier techniques. So basically think of it as without Tengen, all this is going to crash and fall. All this is going to crash and burn. And it will be very hard to carry out missions and have appropriate levels of security. So Tengen's curse technique is immortality. So basically what happens with Tengen is that they live forever, as immortality is. But every 500 years, Tengen has to find a star plasma vessel that matches with them. And then they have to overwrite that body's genetic code, essentially. So Riko, who in this case is, I think she's about 14 at this time, is basically going to be merging with this ever-present century-old being and basically not be herself anymore. So to keep Tengen from ascending, as I'll call it, they have to choose a star plasma vessel for Tengen to merge with and rewrite that body's genetic information and to stop it from occurring. In other words, if they get in the way of this happening, Tengen could potentially destroy the world, so they kind of have to do this once every 500 years. Throughout Tengen's long life, there were 2 groups that kind of came up, and they kind of worship Tengen. Well, one worships Tengen as a deity. The other one is very interesting. But those 2 groups, the Curse User Group Q and the Star Religious Group known as the Time Vessel Association, have different reasons for why they want to kill Riko. So so Getsuo and Gojo have to protect Riko from these 2 groups. And their reasoning for wanting to get rid of Riko are kind of the same and kind of not the same. So the group Q wants Tengen to basically become and ascend and destroy humanity. They want this to happen. They want Jujutsu to crumble, so they kind of need Rigo to go. Whereas the Time Association or the Star Religious Group wants, they are like, ew, don't merge with Tengen. Tengen is our all pure deity. You'll just like be dirty, essentially. So they want Tengen to remain as pure as possible. So over the course of the next 2 days, Geto and Gojo are to protect Riko so that she can safely merge with Tengen and everything's fine. Why you would instill this to 15-year-olds, 15, 16-year-olds, I do not know. I understand that they are the strongest, but I already can see some red flags popping up already. So on day one, it's kind of portrayed differently in the manga versus the anime. In the anime, Geto actually goes to Riko's like apartment and rings the doorbell, and then the whole side of the building is thrown out and she's like falling and Geto has to save her. Whereas in the manga, both Geto and Gojo are approaching her apartment building and it still happens. It's just that Geto doesn't ring a doorbell and trigger it. But anyway, so they save Riko from her death. They beat up 2 members of Q and they try to get her to a safe space. She says, I want to go to school. So Riko is like, I want to go to school. I want to say goodbye to my friends, because you have to remember she's 14. She's going to be merging with this person and she'll essentially lose herself. It's almost like erasing her from her own body, which is really sad to think about. And I can kind of see how this caused problems for Geto as we talk more about what ended up happening. But they took Riko back to her school. She, sees her friends, and more importantly, she's with her maid Kuroi, who basically raised her. Riko was an orphan at some point, and so her maid has kind of stepped up and kind of been her caretaker since then. So she's very close to her maid Kuroi. Long story short, the school gets ambushed by cursed users, by sorcerers that are looking to kill Riko because somebody put a bounty on her head for a lot of money for her to die before the merger happens. I say merger like it's a business, but you get what I'm saying. Before the Tengen merger happens. So somebody placed a bounty on her head online. So everybody's coming out the woodwork. Everybody's like, all right, let's kill this kid. And, all hell breaks loose, essentially. Gojo does his best to protect Riko, but what ends up happening is Geto kind of not drops the ball, but something ends up happening where Kuroi gets kidnapped and they have to go to Okinawa in order to get Kuroi. This is not really that much of a big deal because literally in a few pages, they get Kuroi and now they're on the beach. So it's not really that big of a deal. However, something that I should note about Geto in terms of his personality, he is very, I don't want to say a perfectionist, but he takes things very hard on himself. Like he was blaming himself for how Kuroi got, kidnapped, and he really put it on himself. And, Gojo being his friend and was trying to basically be like, it's okay. We'll figure it out. No big deal. And I think that they worked well together because they balanced each other out. Now we'll talk about Gojo definitely in a future episode. I kind of want to see what happens with the manga first. I kind of want the manga to wrap up before we talk about Gojo, because I feel Gojo is a very complex character, whereas Geto's story is essentially done. So I think it's safer to talk about Geto first. So they're on the beach. They're in Okinawa. They're just waiting for the next day to come so they can leave Okinawa. So they can actually they were trying to leave that day. Geto was trying to say, hey, this is cute. You guys are playing on the beach and all that, but we gotta go. We gotta go back. We got a job to do. So Gojo steps in and kind of says, hey, let's just stay. Let's just stay another day. Let's just stay overnight. There's less cursed users here, less potential for things to go wrong than if we go back today. And Gojo really wanted Riko to kind of live out her last day, where she can be herself and before she has to merge with Tengen. So Geto notices that Gojo has been using his curse technique, basically 25-8, since they've arrived in Okinawa. And the thing about Gojo's technique is that it's very draining, and he has been losing sleep. And, he's supposed to be the strongest. And if you know anything about Gojo, his techniques, basically, he's the luckiest duck to ever duck, to ever quack. And the 2 powers that he has are extremely rare and very powerful, not just separately, but together. So he's kind of like the golden child of JJK and, basically very OP. His power is extremely OP. But essentially, he has been losing sleep. And it's becoming concerning. Again, these are only 15, 16-year-old kids, so it's important to understand that the decisions that were made during this period really set the tone for how things kind of ended up in their adulthood. So, Geto was kind of like, are you sure you're okay? And Gojo was like, I'll be fine. Like, I'm not going to worry about it. We got like backup here anyway. We'll be fine. And as a result, Gojo doesn't sleep again. So they get on the plane. They go back to Jujutsu High. They get within the barriers of Jujutsu High. Again, Tengen is kind of responsible for making sure everybody's good to go and things like that. As soon as Gojo lets go of his power, all hell breaks loose. Gojo is suddenly stabbed through the chest, square in the chest from the back, by this assassin. Geto freaks out and wants to defend his friend as soon as possible. Gojo kind of bluffs and saves face and say, hey, you need to like take Roy, take Rico, go finish the job. Essentially, don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Well, Geto does exactly what he's asked. So Geto takes Rico and Kuroi to the corridor where Tengen is in slowly instructing, they say goodbye to Kuroi. He walks Rico through the tunnel, and right when he's about to instruct Rico, okay, go ahead and go down to Tengen, he's like giving directions about where she needs to go. And he pulls a 180 and goes, I mean, if you just want to stay with us, you can do so. And Rico's all for it. And she's very excited. And she's like, I want to stay with you guys. I want to, she wants to live her life. She wants to be 14. She wants to be happy. And then there's a gunshot. And Rico dies in front of Geto. And everything that he knew, everything he had known about Jujutsu World, everything he had known about why he wanted to do the things he wanted to do, perished in that moment. And I think I need to back up a little bit to kind of talk about why this switch matters so much. Because Geto was very much I don't want to say by the book kind of teenager, but very much like, we exist to protect humans. We exist to protect non-sorcerers. We exist to protect the weak. And Gojo was always like, if they're weak, fuck it. They're weak, who cares? Survival of the fittest, whatever happens, happens. And Geto would always remind Gojo, no, like, where's your empathy? We have to do this. And Gojo always carried this, if you do all of this, you protect, the weak, whatever, it makes you weak. It's boring. It's a boring way of thinking. But everything that Geto knew in that moment perished. Everything he knew. The feeling he felt to move forward with his friend to protect, because at that point, he didn't know what happened to Gojo. And to see Rico square, shot right in the head in front of him, changed everything. This man comes out from the shadows and is the assassin that stabbed Gojo in the back. And he's like, wait a minute. If you are here, where's Gojo? And the assassin goes, oh, him? Oh, I killed him. I killed Gojo Satoru. I killed him. I can't even imagine being Geto in that moment and your friend that you've known for so long, your friend that you together are called the strongest. You all go on missions together. This is supposed to be a routine job. And now your friend's dead. That, I can't even imagine what goes through your mind in those moments. So obviously Geto squared up. He said, okay. He was like, it's time for you to die. He even asked, like, where's the maid? And he's like, oh, the maid? Oh yeah, no, I killed her too. So he's like, oh no, we gotta square up. We gotta square up. I'm doing a terrible job paraphrasing, but when you're reading it and watching it, it's so much more impactful. But, so they started to fight. Long story short, Geto gets his ass handed to him. Assassin lays him out and was going to kill him, but basically encouraged Geto to enjoy his life because he was so blessed to be a sorcerer and blessed to have these talents and be, a curse, be able to manipulate curses and things. But the one thing that the assassin said that stood out to him was, you all lost to a monkey like me that can't even use Jujutsu. So let's talk about this assassin really quickly. And I want to have a whole separate episode about Mr. Toji Fushiguro, but we're not going to have this conversation now. But Toji is the assassin that, at this point, had gravely injured Gojo, had gravely injured Geto, had killed Riko, killed Kuroi, and was also the one that placed the bounty on Riko's head in the first place, that had Gojo wear out his technique. So Toji was plotting. And calling himself a monkey that can't even use Jujutsu, calling himself that, stuck with Geto in ways I can't even imagine or describe. It's peak trauma. Peak trauma if we had to come up with a way to label it. So fast forward, Gojo figures out how to use reverse curse technique, basically brings himself back from the brink of death, kills Toji, and goes to retrieve Riko's body from the Star Religious Group, which is actually why Toji went after her. He was hired by the Star Religious Group to kill Riko in the first place. So after Toji had turned in her body, Gojo went to go retrieve it. But Geto was also going to go retrieve it. So he kind of intersects and meets Gojo, this new reawakened Gojo, who he thought was dead. I can't even imagine you on the verge of death yourself. You get healed. You go to try to handle the rest of your mission thinking your friend is dead and your friend is standing there in front of you. But something's off. And you don't know what's off. And Gojo is holding Riko's body in his hands, and he looks at Geto and he's like, okay, do we kill all these people? Because there are people clapping. There are people clapping at Riko's dead body, clapping. And Gojo's like, do we kill him? And Geto says, no. There will be no, don't do it. Like, these are just like followers. These aren't even like the head honchos. Like, it eventually things will dissolve. Don't kill them. And so Gojo's like, well, what's the point in that? And Geto's like, exactly that. There's no point to it. Geto basically implies that if you're going to kill, there needs to be a reason behind it, a purpose to it. So a year passes, and we are now talking 16, 17-year-old Gojo and Geto, and Gojo has these new reawakened powers, and my man is feeling himself, and he's very much like, I can do this and this and control this and control this, and I have all these cool things, and I can like refresh my brain every 2 seconds, and he's very much involved in this new world of his. And because of this reawakening with Gojo, he's actually been sent on missions by himself. Geto doesn't accompany him anymore. They used to do these missions together, and they were a dynamic duo, and now Gojo is just the strongest by himself. He doesn't need Geto. And Geto starts to really think about his interaction with Toji. Really think about how that one day changed everything he knew about Jujutsu, like relations and everything. Like it really fucked him up. If I'm gonna be honest, he really got fucked up after that. And in the anime, they do a really good job of showing kind of his face and kind of his dark circles. His face is more gaunt. He looks visibly like something's wrong with him. But in the manga, it's less apparent. It's definitely implied something's going on, but they hit a little harder in the anime in terms of visuals. And, Gojo was like, you okay? Like, did you eat something? Did you eat something wrong? Very casual. But that's just how Gojo is. He's very playful. But he didn't, like, sit down with him. He wasn't like, what's going on with you? Like, you good? Like, it's just like, did you eat something bad? And, I'm sure Geto, in his own fashion, didn't want to worry his friend or didn't know how to explain to his friend what he was thinking and just kind of, casually played it off. and said, no, everything's fine. I'm good. No big deal. Well, it was a bigger deal than we bargained for. So before I talk more about Geto, I want to briefly talk about trauma and how it impacts us and our brains. Trauma can be so impactful. It can literally change the way you remember things. It can change the way you experience things. Trauma is not something to downplay, nor is it something that somebody can just get over. Whether it was trauma of emotional weight, whether it was trauma of physical, mental weight, all of those things matter, because the way that we experience things as people, the trauma that we experience shapes us as people. And I think that goes without saying. But unfortunately, you have some people, even in, I've heard from my own clientele, the ones that I work with, where they get like new psychiatrists, or they had a counselor that told them to get over it. You should get over it. You need to move on from it. And yes, that's so easy to say when you were not the person that went through that. So I just want to validate that if you've gone through something and it's something that's changed the fabric of who you are, that's normal. You're not a strange bird for that. But I do think what's important when we talk about trauma is, when you're ready, process it. Process how it affected you. Process things you can try to help cope with what you have. I can't promise you that things will change in a year. I can't promise you that things will change in, 5 years. But what matters is that you're working towards it at your pace, in your own way. Because just letting it sit on you is not helping you, darling. I promise you. So let's talk about how Geto's trauma impacted kind of where he ended up in the series. Geto was going through it. My man was sitting there in the shower. My man was dazed. He was going through it. And he has a conversation with Haibara, who's at that point a second year student, while Geto was a third year, I believe. And he asked Haibara, like, why do you what's so great about being a sorcerer? And Haibara was like, if I could just, he's so positive. And he's like, if I could just do this one thing, if I could do this one thing and be really good at it, that's all that matters to me. And you see like a little light come back in Geto's eyes after that. But then the conversation he has with Yuki Tsukumo. Now, I want to go on record and say I don't blame Yuki for what Geto ended up doing, but I think that it is important to take people seriously when they talk about things. Even if something seems like an offhanded comment, it doesn't hurt to check in about it. So Geto and Haibara come across Yuki, and Yuki is the other special grade. So remember I said there are 4 special grades. So at this point, Yuki is the 3rd special grade. And Yuki kind of had a reputation of like not being around a lot, not really going on her missions like she's supposed to. So Geto kind of teaches her about that. But they get into a conversation about cursed energy and how it comes to be and the origins of it. And she talks about how Jujutsu sorcerers can control their cursed energy. So for those that are not familiar with JJK and kind of the series, so cursed spirits and curses kind of come from humans pretty much radiating negative energy. And that's how they live. That's how they come to be. That's what they live on. So anger, jealousy, hatred, all those things can give birth to cursed spirits. So Geto is pretty much sitting here and he's like, I hate doing this shit day in, day out. He really hates it. Now, to his credit, if I had to do what he had to do, I hate it too. So I mentioned earlier that he consumes cursed spirits and they kind of become part of his arsenal. Well, he literally has to eat them. And from what he says it tastes like somebody shoved a rag down his throat that was used to wipe up like shit and vomit. That's literally what he calls it. And I can't even imagine. He's like, who am I enduring this for? Why am I enduring this? What is the point of me enduring this? And I don't blame him. Like, no butt show. I couldn't do that every day. I could not do that every day. So I feel for him. I feel for him in that frustration of, why am I doing this? What is the point of me doing this? Humans aren't even grateful that the fact that we do this. Why the hell should we keep doing this? And Yuki notices that he's at a crossroads, and when they're talking about cursed energy and kind of the origin, so she says, you either teach all humans how to use their cursed energy, or you get rid of cursed energy. You just have to get rid of it. Those are only two ways you can do it. It then leads to, now, another way you could do it is if you just killed all the non-sorcerers. To which Geto's like, Geto's like, ding, ding, ding. That sounds about right. Let me just do that. And so Yuki even says, like, I wouldn't be, out of my mind enough to do that. And Geto's like, what if somebody was? Right? Kind of like, oh, that's it's like the lights went on, and he was like, wait a minute. He's like, we could just do that. And it's at that point that Geto kind of turns. So Yuki kind of says, you're kind of at this crossroads. You can either go down this path and, hate humans, hate non-sorcerers, and do whatever, or you can go down this path and continue to do your duty. Well, that all kind of came to a breaking point where Geto was sent off on a solo mission to kind of this outskirts town on the outskirts, kind of in the countryside. And there's just two girls in a cage. And the non-sorcerers were basically like, they're the problem. They have caused all the issues here. And Geto is trying to calmly explain, no, I've taken care of the issue. These girls had nothing to do with it. But these people had already beaten these young girls. They had already blamed them for the atrocities that occurred, even though the professionals there tried to tell them that these young girls had nothing to do with it. And that was just his breaking point, seeing what they did to those young girls and like beating them and putting them in harm's way and accusing them of doing things that they didn't do just because they were young sorcerers, was kind of it for him. He said, I'm done. And he massacred the entire village. Killed them all. He massacred the entire village. The superiors found out about it and sentenced him to death. Basically, on sight, Geto dies. Oh, I'm getting chills just thinking about how that played out in the anime. But, so Geto meets up with Shoko, who is another friend amongst their little friend triangle. So it's Gojo, Geto, and Shoko. He meets up with Shoko. He's like, you want to light for your cigarette? And they start talking. And she's like, is everything they said true? He's like, yeah. She's like, whoo. She said, okay. So she calls Gojo immediately. And I think, I don't know what Gojo said over the phone, but she says, like, she's like, I'm not trying to get killed. You come deal with this, basically. Like, you come get him. So Gojo comes down there and they get into this argument. And what's more wild is that Geto killed his parents. Geto, when he saved those young girls, he did a full pivot. And he said, all non-sorcerers have to die. And did not even spare his own parents. And Gojo confronts him about it. He's like, you killed your own parents? And he's like, basically like, I don't want to be a hypocrite. He said, I can't make exceptions. Geto killed his own parents, y'all. Like, it's wild. It's absolutely wild, just the pivot that he made. And then Gojo then says, you want to rid the world of non-sorcerers. It's impossible to do that. It's impossible to do it. It's foolish to do that. There's no way you can. And Geto looks him dead in the face and said, I could if I were you. If I had your ability, I could do it. And Gojo kind of pauses and he asks him a question. He says, are you Gojo Satoru because, he said, are you the strongest because you're Gojo Satoru, or are you Gojo Satoru because you're the strongest? Baby, that question. Woo! When I say you heard the on the record there, but again, that's something we'll talk further more about in kind of Gojo's episode whenever this manga decides it wants to end. But Geto basically tells Gojo, I am going to do what I want to do for myself. He said, this is the path I've chosen for myself. This is what I'm going to do. And he made quick on that promise. And we see him in Jujutsu Kaisen 0, where he has now kind of worked with humans non-sorcerers to kind of use them for money, essentially. So he'll threaten them, get money from them. He will do like small exorcisms that come off like blessings, like religious blessings, in order for him to like get money, and things like that. But Geto, especially in Zero, will not hesitate to use violence to get his point across, to make sure that he's heard, that his family is taken care of. He kind of adopts those two girls he saved in that village and meets other sorcerers and kind of adopts like a pseudo family for himself. But when he meets with Gojo again 10 years later, oh my god, the when you're because the movie came out before the second season came out, so the first part when they were teenagers hadn't been animated yet. So to see them kind of together at 28, and Gojo's reaction to him, kind of like, damn. And I should also mention that Gojo was tasked with killing him, essentially, because again, it was on site to kill Geto, and they're sitting there 16, 17 years old. I think they were 17 at that point, and he just can't kill him. That's his friend. That's his best friend. He can't do it. He can't do it. And to see him again after that, 10 years later, he still can't do it. And then they do the big fight, and Yuta gravely injures Geto, and then Gojo kind of takes him out. What got me the most was that even in death, Geto had no regrets about the path that he chose or the way he chose to identify things. And when you first encounter him in Jujutsu Kaisen 0, he keeps calling Ray like monkeys, monkeys, monkeys. And so people were making memes like, oh my god, he's racist. And it's like, no, that's not it. They don't explain the reason until later when Toji refers to himself as a monkey, when Toji changed the fabric of how he viewed Jujutsu society. Because Toji didn't have curse energy. Toji didn't have a curse technique. Toji had a heavily restriction. It was just really fast and really strong, and beat their ass. Like, I don't know that. So it's just so interesting to see kind of that come full circle. How Geto's trauma really influenced his trajectory into what he chose to do moving forward. Even at 17, he said, "Fuck it, I'm making my mind up, and I am going to kill all these humans and nobody's going to stop me," just because he lost by Toji. Instead of taking that second chance at life, which is ironic because Toji told him to like take this second chance and essentially do something with it, or be grateful he didn't kill him. And all Geto did was just mull over it and stew over it. He didn't talk to anybody about it. He didn't talk to anybody about what he was going through. And if you're listening and you're kind of in the same boat as Geto, I think it kind of gets into this conversation of, check on your strong friends, right? The check on your strong friends. Your friends never may know. You never may know that somebody might need you. But I think we also need to work on saying something too. My best friend of 10 years, I can look at her in the face and know when she wants to leave someplace. I can tell when she's not doing good. Not just because I know her, but I also know her well enough to know that she won't tell me. I know her well enough to know that she will not tell me when she's not doing great. I have to ask her. So I think that if you are in this boat as a friend, if you're in this boat as the person who is having these issues, trying to figure out what to do or what's on your mind, if you have the people available, if you have a close friend available, a family member available, a counselor available, whatever it may be, take those chances to check in. Please do, because as much as we all like to say that we would see things coming and we would be there and do things like that, sometimes we all get caught up in our own lives. We all become busy bees. We all have our own trauma that we gamble with. And it can be hard to check in like we need to. I know I'm guilty of that, and I'm a damn therapist. It's hard to get that check in and say, hey, you okay? You good? I haven't heard from you. I hope you're doing well. It can be hard to remind ourselves that we also have to let people know when we're not doing good too. I tell my clients all the time, I can't read your mind. If I could, it'd make my job 10 times easier. So you could be going through something, but I may not know about it. And I think we all know how shitty it feels when we wish we could have been there for somebody, or we wish we could have done something. It's always like, if I had just known. If I had just known, if I had just known. So I think that we as a society can also improve our communication, at least honest communication, especially in talking about how we feel about things. I would love to wave a magic wand and, have us all process everything and use our coping strategies and get through it. But sometimes it's harder for people than others. Sometimes people just need that one time. Some people need consistent talks. Some people need constant checkups. Some people just need support, especially when they don't have any or they believe they don't have any. And I don't know if Geto believed he didn't have any, but I think maybe part of him knew that if he did talk to Gojo about it, that he would talk him out of it. And I think that he just needed to find his own way. Now, I don't condone what he ended up coming up with. But I think what's interesting that Anonymous, who's a year younger than Gojo and Geto, made a comment about Geto and the path that he chose. And he doesn't agree with it. He understands why Geto made that decision, which I think says a lot and speaks volumes. I don't have to agree with a lot of things. I don't have to agree with the way somebody chooses to do certain things. I don't have to agree with the way that somebody sees the world. But I think that empathy and that understanding about how somebody got to where they are, where they were, will take us a lot longer. Will take us a lot longer in society and a lot better off in society than just arguing about it all the time. I don't have to agree with the way that somebody chooses to parent their child, but I can see how they got there. Doesn't make it right, but I can see how we got from A to Z, 100%. And I've always appreciated Geto for being kind of the antagonist that could have been stopped. He didn't have to be the villain. He didn't have to be a bad guy. But it's just timing, trauma, and circumstances. Especially that post-traumatic kind of processing. And honestly, if I had to diagnose anything, that is 100% PTSD. Especially when he was a teenager, the negative thoughts, the reliving it in some aspects, especially if it was still bothering him a year later, he was thinking about that constantly, or at least majority of the time, and just hadn't shared it. 100% PTSD. Especially then with the way that he treated other people after that. Even when he came across Maki and Zero, the way he looked at her, just because she can't see curses and she's, basically set up just like Toji. And he's just the disgust he has when he looks at her. It's so telling. Even though she's never done anything to him, he's just like, she's the most vile thing on the planet. He cannot be bothered with her. He even sprays down his clothes when he interacts with humans, like non-sorcerers. It's absolutely flabbergasting to see this young man who's all about, we need to protect the weak and, things like that, and just do a complete 180 after this event. It is absolutely wild to see, but I think that's what makes characters like him so cool. It's like you can kind of talk about that pivot. You can talk about why he ended up where he ended up. So, and he was partially one of the inspirations behind why I wanted to make a podcast like this, because you can definitely see that trauma response in Geto. And I think that's something that a lot of folks can relate to, especially when you maybe come across people you don't like, right? People who kind of fit the bill of something that has brought you pain at some point. But yeah, I think that'll do it. I think that'll do it for the first full kind of deep dive into, Suguru Geto. I thought it went pretty good. Let me know what you guys think. Leave some comments wherever you're hearing this. I would love to get your feedback on it. You can write into askanimental@gmail.com and let me know how you felt about it as well. And yeah. Thank you so much for listening. It was really fun recording this and kind of putting everything together. I am so happy I got a chance to do this. Again, my name is Lainey. I am the host of AniMental. You can find AniMental on all socials at AniMental Pod, except Facebook. We are AniMental Podcast on Facebook. So that is AniMentalPod on all socials except Facebook. Then you put a CAST at the end of that. If you're trying to find us on Facebook. If you have any questions you would like me to answer, if you have any comments, concerns about this episode or any future episodes, if you would like to see me, or hear me talk about certain characters, feel free to submit them at askanimental@gmail.com. That is askanimental@gmail.com. And I'll see you guys next Sunday. Take care of yourselves and stay safe out there. Bye-bye.